For 5 seconds. Colburn shoots, deflected, score! The Flyers tie it with 2.8 seconds remaining. Excellent for them. So the Penguins have had leads of 2-0, 3-1. Now Couturier ties it at 5. Sean Couturier with his second goal of the night.
TheFourthPeriod.com presents the O&B Puckcast, episode number 85. The Flyers shake the Habs and are ready now to tackle the New York Islanders in the conference semifinals. We'll talk about that and so much more. I'm your host, Isaiah, and I'm here with my partners, Shep B.
How you doing? Let's go Flyers.
Yes, sir. And the great Dan Silver.
Big exhale after that first round win.
Shit, tell me about it. All right, so what we're going to do tonight, it's going to be a jam-packed episode. We're going to take you through the Habs series from where we left off, which I believe we did the first 3 games, and we have 3 more we're going to touch on. And then, of course, we're going to go through and preview the matchup that the Flyers are going to have with the conference semifinal opponent, the New York Islanders. And then we're going to go through the rest of the league. There's some stories. There's some subplots. There's AV and his mind games, so much more. But, Dan, I want to start with you because you said it. The Flyers gave us all a big exhale. And give us your overall impression of where you were at, say, after Game 4. The Flyers are up 3-1. And where you ended up, and maybe just summing it up, looking at the big picture and what that, what that portends going forward.
Yeah, I mean, the Flyers, I think they were outscored in this series, and they were outscored, outchanced, outshot, and they still found a way to win. I think a lot of it had to do with Carter Hart. It had to do with the way that they sort of have this bend but don't break type of style, and they kept a lot of the shots to the perimeter. But, the series was they kind of lucked into a win in Game 1, and then they got blown out in Game 2. Then they had 2 games 3 and 4, were these games where they didn't allow a goal in either game. They didn't look great, but they also didn't give up a lot of quality chances to Montreal. We're hoping they close it out in 5. They come into that game, and the power play continues to stink early on, and they give up a shorthanded goal to Yoel Armia. And then it was such a strange game with all the penalties. The 5-minute major to Kotkaniemi, which then the Flyers scored 2 on, and then the Phil Myers double minor, and the Canadiens score. That game was just the craziest game of the series. Then with Gallagher coming out of it with the broken jaw after he was talking after he had his jaw broken. And then Game 6 everyone was amped up for Game 6, and from an excitement standpoint, it was kind of a little bit of a letdown for Flyers fans. Hey, we'll take it. We won the game 3-2. The Flyers did what they had to do in Game 6 to close this one out. I mean, they scored 28 seconds in, Ivan Provorov from the point, and then they got the goal from Kevin Hayes 5 minutes in. And I think, again, they were almost outplayed for the rest of the game. But they just bend but don't break, and I think it was not a pretty series if you're a Flyer fan, but they got through it, and now you got to hope that some of the big guns start putting pucks in the net.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there to unpack, if you will, and there's other subplots, if you will, and one of the 2 things that come to mind that were keys to victory were obviously, like Dan mentioned, Carter Hart and his performance all but one of the games. He was a little shaky in game 2, but the Flyers as a team had just a breakdown. And also their ability to close out games in the third period, to keep the Canadiens on the perimeter and not, and be able to limit the number of high-quality chances. And that allows you to close games out. And those are certainly two big factors in the Flyers' victory in this series. Chef, what do you take from what the Flyers were able to do, winning their first playoff series since 2012, 8 years?
Well, for the most part, the stuff they did right, I'm going to say they won the face-offs. They had to win the majority of the time. That was a good thing. They did try, more successful in Game 6 than in Game 5, that they kept Montreal to the outside. They were not – one of the things that was irritating me is – and they saw it a couple of times, especially in even in the win, that when they were battle for pucks, and I even think Clement even touched on it, the battle for the pucks, like Montreal would have one or two guys in there, and there'd be 3 Flyers in that against the wall there trying to get the puck back, and they couldn't win those 1-on-1 battles or 2-on-3 battles or 3-on-2 battles in the boards. So that was a little concerning, but like overall, I want to say it was a little bit of luck too. They did do some of the things right to keep them in the games. Like Dan said, Carter Hart, when he had to come up with those, we talked about it all season before when we didn't have a goalie, was the deflating saves, like one he should have had. Pretty much, he saved pretty much all that he had to save. There wasn't any gimmies or bad goals he let in the last 2 games. So, that was a huge thing to take away from that we haven't seen in, you're right, since the last playoff win, is a goalie that we could sit there and say, as long as we keep everything on the outside and let him see what he needs to see, he's going to make those strong saves, those routine saves, and probably steal a couple goals out of the net from the other team.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt about that, and certainly hope that Carter Hart is better than the Brizaster in 2012. But that's what they had, right? They had in 2012 they had Briz and they had Bob. Isn't that?
Yeah. I think it was Brizgalov and Bobrovsky.
Right.
In the crazy series against the Penguins, which they managed to win despite giving up 100 goals. And then I think, in the second round, they just kind of got blew out by the Devils? Was it?
Yeah. The Devils, that was... they just checked them to as Gene Hart would say, to a fare thee well, and that was the end of that. And the Devils went on to the finals that year and lost to the LA Kings. But, gents, let's look at some subplots and maybe dig a little deeper with some of these things. The Niskanen suspension for the Gallagher hit was a little bit of a hockey play gone wrong, but I do believe there should have been a suspension, as opposed to what happened with Kotkaniemi, who already had his discipline. He was given a major and a match penalty, and he's thrown out of the game. And so no more discipline was necessary. But it's really interesting what that set up. Okay, first off, Dan, it set up AV in a series of mind games that seemed to go on as this series got chippier and nastier. And it was really interesting. AV seemed to be honed in on the Gallagher incident, where Gallagher had a broken jaw, and he kept yapping, and they didn't know it was broken at the time. And AV said right after the game that he seemed fine, and that the Canadiens seemed to be angling for something. Then it comes out that he has a broken jaw, is going to be out for the season or the series, what have you. And they ask AV if he wants to take it back. And then, of course, AV earlier, in game, game 5, where he was going to take Carter Hart out, and they reviewed a goal, and the goal was, I forget who, was it Suzuki, I think?
Suzuki was offside.
Yeah, right. And then he decided not to take him out. And AV is always operating at this level. And it seemed like AV remembered a 2014 incident where Brandon Prust had broken somebody's jaw, and Derek Stepan from the Rangers, and Gallagher was yapping about how Stepan seemed to be fine, and I think, if he was a coach at the time, I believe. So it's an interesting dynamic there that you get from a veteran coach. I can't imagine somebody like Hackstall doing anything like that. He'd just be finding a way to get Yuri Laterra back on the team. Dan, what your thoughts about how he handled those situations as a veteran coach?
Yeah, I mean, look, the Flyers lost 2 games in this series. After the first game they lost, he came out and basically made a preposterous statement, ripping Kirk Muller for, using his top power play unit towards the end of the game.
Right.
Well, Muller wants to try and get that group some repetition. Probably the reason that Vigneault brought that up was to try and make it more about him and take some of the tension away from how badly his team had played in that game too. Then, after Game 5, the Flyers lose. They didn't play all that terribly. But again, he does something to get the attention on him, because for 2 straight days after that game, all people were talking about was Alain Vigneault. Wow, he remembered that, 8 years ago or whatever, that Gallagher had ripped a player on the Rangers who Vigneault coached for doing the same exact thing that Gallagher was now doing after this game. And it turned into, everyone is just on Twitter is, this is great, Flyers fans, this guy's hilarious, and Canadiens fans are ripping into Flyers fans, and all of a sudden, instead of being, all the attention on the team, it's now on the coach and what he's saying. And I think he's done a really good job of taking the attention away from his players to a certain respect and putting it on him, which allows the guys to be a little bit looser. I mean, look, they see all the comments. They're in the bubble. I guarantee you these guys are on Twitter and kind of looking at what's going on, and they see that, oh man, Vigneault, this is incredible. This guy remembered this, and then they're not talking about the game as much, and they're more relaxed. So I think it's a lot of gamesmanship, as they say, from a very smart, very smooth head coach to to just get his team's mindset where he wants it to be, and he kind of does that through the media. So I was very impressed with the way that Vigneault handled that.
Yeah, and AV, of course, had to respond to what the game situations presented to him in the series. Chef, when you think about Niskanen out and a third line where Derek Grant seemed to be exposed as a guy who can't really play third line center at playoff pace. So AV shuffles the lines. He has Giroux back at center between JVR and Lawton, a line I would never want to see again. I would call them the Lost Boys. It's a good, right there with the Legion of Doom and the gag line and all the great lines, but only just 180 degrees opposite. And then, of course, then there's a committee approach with Ivan Provorov, and I'll get into that a little bit. But first, what was your thinking that, that AV felt compelled to put Claude back at center, and he wasn't really having a great playoff to begin with?
Yeah, if you had to question anything that AV's done in the last couple of games, I mean, that would be it. That line befuddled me. I think that's the only way I can say it. And still have a PG rating. I didn't understand it. It seemed like a pointless third line to me. But maybe he's trying to. I understand the purpose of it. It was probably trying to get JVR with G to kind of generate some offense, and maybe like the spark plug that is Scott Lawton, all that energy that he has, send him around to kind of make up the difference for the slow speed that you get out of JVR anymore. But overall, D plus, I guess, if I had to rate the line. It was not my favorite. I don't want to harp on that. It just seemed to be not really effective the whole game.
Well, we'll be talking about third line combos as we talk about the Islanders and what the Flyers are going to do matchup wise. But sticking with what also occurred after the Niskanen suspension, Dan, there was a committee approach, like I mentioned earlier, with Ivan Provorov. Gostisbehere is inserted into the lineup, and Niskanen and Provy have been a really solid first pair all game. Very interesting though, but that by the third period, after trying several combinations, a player that we have considered the heir apparent on the first line with first pair with Provy ended up getting an 11.5 shifts and really ends up being the choice for Alain Vigneault to work with Ivan Provorov and with some of the most difficult minutes.
Yeah, this was really a fascinating situation because Matt Niskanen, who's been on the top pair all season, is out with the suspension. Quite honestly, though, he hasn't played very well in this series.
Yeah.
So I wasn't viewing it as kind of like a major problem. The problem was going to be who do you replace him with and how do you handle it? There were people on Twitter talking about there's all these people that just don't like Shane Gostisbehere, and I don't really understand it because, yes, he can hurt you sometimes defensively, but he's got the potential to be a very good defenseman in the NHL. Some people were calling for Friedman to be in the lineup. I didn't think it was a question at all that it was going to be Shane Gostisbehere. And then it was just a question of how is he going to be used. And first of all, you could argue that after Provorov, that Ghost was actually the best defenseman in the game for the Flyers. He was skating. I mean, his speed is back to where it was post all these knee problems. A number of times he kind of took the puck right out of his own zone, up the center of the ice, got it up the ice. On the Kevin Hayes goal, it was all Ghost. He took 2 hits along the boards. He got the puck into the zone. He also had a couple huge defensive plays. He destroyed Nick Suzuki with a huge open ice hit.
Yeah.
And then behind the Flyers net, he took Kotkaniemi out of the game. So he played a great game. So first, let's get that out of the way. And I'm going to be interested to see if they find a way to keep him in the lineup for game 1 of the Islanders game. Because, look, Braun has not been very good either. So I would not be shocked if Braun gets a game off. I don't know. I just think it's going to be tough for them not to have Ghost in the lineup. But, they might not. But, yes, as the game went on, Phil Myers was the guy who got the most shifts with Ivan Provorov. And he is the guy that, look, he's got the potential to be a top pair defenseman. He's right-handed. He's perfect in that spot. So, I think that once Niskanen is gone, or maybe even next year in the last year of Niskanen's contract, we'll see some Myers. But for the here and now, it's going to be interesting to see what happens when Niskanen comes back and what they do, because I thought Shane Gostisbehere played a really good game.
Yeah, I mean, to me, he was a little nervous in the beginning, but like you said, as the game wore on, that was the Shane Gostisbehere that we were raving about. He was physical, he was holding the blue line, he was active, he had his lateral mobility and his shiftiness. And look, he's an asset. I still don't think he has much of a future with the team because of the salary cap and the realities that will present themselves there. But for now, the Flyers need as much dynamism anywhere they can on the ice. They're not getting a lot out of Konechny. He's sulking a little bit. I know he's trying. But it was such a difference because Gostisbehere, I'm like, wow, there's actually a guy on the Flyers that looks like he belongs on the Canadiens. Because the Canadiens are much more dynamic throughout most of the series. It was very frustrating. The Flyers had to put their lunch pail on to win this whole thing, and it was welcome to see him back. I'll just put it that way. But another thing, and Dan, I'm going to go back to you on this because we're on the defense. I wanted to close this out. Sanheim was also a dynamic force on the blue line, but man, he made a couple plays in the corners where he was really soft, and the Canadian forwards kind of came out of the corner unchallenged. And he did that, I think, earlier this year or last year against the Islanders. You're playing against those Islanders. You can't do that. They thrive on that. And I want to get off on the Islanders, but I'm wondering if Sanheim is battling some kind of injury or he's just shying away from the ferocity of the playoff intensity, but he's got to be harder on the puck.
I mean, I've watched Travis Sanheim from when he was in juniors. The season that him and Ivan Provorov were both in the WHL, I bought the WHL package. I watched all those two guys' games. And even going back to then, Travis Sanheim has never been a particularly physical player. And quite honestly, he would get caught out of position a decent amount when he was playing back in the juniors in the WHL. And so his progression in the NHL has actually been a little faster than I thought it might be in terms of in the defensive zone, because he's turned into a pretty damn good defensive player. For him, it's about positioning. He's just not that physical of a player. But he's going to be lapses. I mean, look, every player in the NHL is prone to lapses, and Sanheim, to me, maybe a little more than some other guys is. Yeah, I mean, the angle that he played on a couple of goals that the Canadiens scored were not good. And, it's part of why I think that Sanheim is probably at his peak a second pair defenseman for this team, and why I think Myers has got a little bit of a higher potential just because he's a little bit more physical. And I think Myers is a little bit more instinctual in the defensive zone than Sanheim. So it's not a big concern for me. I mean, watching him play, I don't think he's injured or anything. I just think that it's something you're going to deal with Travis Sanheim to a certain extent. But I don't think you'll see too much of that with him moving forward. I mean, look, Matt Barzal's a guy on the Islanders who no one can really mark up. He's so quick. But I'm fine with how Sanheim played. He made a few mistakes, but honestly, I will be expecting him to make mistakes here and there.
Well, yeah, it's not even a matter of that. It's a matter of effort. Using your stick and angling a guy off. You got him in the corners. You got to challenge him. You can't let him just come out unfettered. So that kind of was my point on that. But we'll be watching that because the Islanders bring that kind of stuff out of you as a team, and they test your compete on every inch of the ice. That'll be interesting. But Chef, just getting back to you, it was really interesting. So on the final shift of the sixth game, the clinching game, who do the Flyers have out as a line, and what does that tell you about the coach's level of trust?
You mean for the last the pat on the head or hurt?
Well, the pat on the head. That was...
I thought,
well, you had Thompson, Grant, and Pitlick.
Yes.
Out there, and three guys that all can play center, although Pitlick is more of a winger. And but it's interesting because most people will, would say, hey, Couturier, I don't know if he was out there the shift before, but what did he do? Thompson gets the puck and rags it for 30 seconds.
Not the jump, and I think the reason they were out there right then, because I think there was an icing. So I think they had to stay out there on the ice for that final face-off. That's what I recall.
And Thompson, who he's been really good. I think that game he was over like 60% in his face-off draws in that last game. So I mean, it was no surprise that he was out there. But the surprise to me is how well he held on to that puck for the last 8-9 seconds.
Right, and they had an extra attacker, and that's laudable. Listen, those guys, particularly Thompson, is going to be a Corsi loser. The numbers are never really going to look good, even accounting for the fact that they can get a lot of defensive zone starts and stuff like that. But they have their own in-house metrics and things like that, and the coach has his own level of trust, and you have to trust AV's instincts. He's not perfect. But, perhaps it was just the icing that was the difference. And honestly, I don't recall, but it was something one of the pundits made a big deal out of. But, it's something that's certainly worth making a bigger deal out of when it comes to subplots in this series is the fact that Carter Hart, Dan, defeated his idol. And we talked about that in the previous show. And, both goalies are excellent. Carter's just a little bit better, and he had a .936 save percentage. And a new stat you're hearing a lot about was how many goals saved above expectation, 2.64. And except for the one game where the team fell apart in Game 2, maybe a little bit shaky in Game 5, but not really, I don't think. Carter Hart did what you wanted him to do, just a little bit better at critical junctures than even Carey Price.
Yeah, I mean, watching the games, I mean, I still think Montreal played a little bit better than the Flyers overall in the series. And so the fact that the Flyers won the series, you got to look at the goalie. Yep. Carter Hart was fantastic. And like you said, he got pulled in the one game. To me, the most telling moment for Carter Hart was in Game 5 when he gave up that goal to Suzuki. They were getting ready to pull him. The Flyers notice that it's an offside play. Hart comes over to the bench. He's clearly a little bit rattled. And Vigneault looks at him and says, hey, this was offside. It's coming back. Are you good to go? And Hart said, yeah, I'm good to go. And he went back in, and he was really good in the game after that. So to me, that was a really telling point about, not that I had any doubt about his ability to kind of like forget about things the minute that they happen, but that showed you that in the playoffs in a spot like that, he can. And he's going to be crucial for this team moving forward if they're going to have any success. Obviously, that goes without saying. And it was really cool watching him in the handshake line when him and Carey Price came together. I mean, you could just see how cool that was for Carter Hart. He's still a kid. I mean, he's still a kid, and you see it in his face. You see it in his eyes. He's got this innocent look about him, and it was really cool to him. But I think he's past that first round, and he's going to be a big advantage for this team moving forward.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I was reading the Craig Custance article in The Athletic, and I think they had a opposing coach, a scout, and an executive that are not in the playoffs. And they asked everybody about it. And one of them, I think it was the executive or the scout, I don't think it was the coach, said that coming to this next round, Carter Hart's really going to be in the spotlight. I don't see that. I mean, he like you were saying, Dan, he did like an instant reset right there. AV asked him, "Are you good to go? If the goal doesn't count?" And he says, "Yeah," like you said. And it was almost like we were referring to earlier, the like kind of little mind games that he's playing, even with his own team, to try and run a check on it. Him and Carter passed that with flying colors, and it
kind of reminds me. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
It kind of reminds me of there was a baseball movie, Kevin Costner, for the love of the game, and where he sits there and he's the pitcher. And he goes up, and while he's getting set to face every batter, he hears all the noise, and he just like does this little clear the mechanism, and everything else fades away. It's like he, like you said, reset. He kind of reminded me of that, where he came up and he went, okay, I'll go back in, and everything. It was almost like a different goalie. Like he needed that little bit of a confidence boost from his coach. Yeah, if you're good, stay in. That kind of thing.
Yeah. And Chef, just staying with that, because there were so many subplots, I didn't want to leave it. The aforementioned head pat by Grant gets the last laugh there after Suzuki earlier in the series. I don't know if it was Game 2. I forget which game it was.
It's a couple times I do.
Where he patted Carter Hart on the head after a goal. It's kind of, I don't even think he did it maliciously or to be in your face. I think he just did it because they might have been teammates or something. Mm-hmm. Kind of like Briere did something like that with, was that Marty Biron or I forget who it was.
It might have been Biron.
When they were, but I don't know if it necessarily happened after a goal, but I forget. It reminded me of something that Briere did. But this one was like right after a goal, and then at the very end, Grant pats Suzuki on the head at the final buzzer, and there was a whole little minor melee, mm-hmm. But that was also
The best thing about that is Carter Hart was skating away he was at the outside, the fringes of it, when all the guys started scuffling, and it looked like, I don't know, it could be just me, but it looked like somebody said something. And he kind of drifted back in and started pulling somebody out of the way. So it was good that Grant stuck up for him, but it was also too like if he's gonna blossom a little bit more, he's got to stand up for a little bit more for himself. I think if that happens again next time, maybe you step up and you say something and kind of like tell him nicely, of course. That's not going to be acceptable.
Yeah, I don't know if that's in Carter's makeup, but Yeah, we'll just have to see. I don't think he's going to turn into Hexy overnight. But I guess the last thing I wanted to put a cap on this was the one thing, another advantage that it showed with AV was his handling of the change in strategy, Dan. There was one thing that came out in this series that AV talked about was Montreal was activating their D a lot more in this series. They had a lot of trailers. They were creating a lot of opportunities as a result of that. And the Flyers had to make some adjustments with that. And that was also something that contributed to what I agree with, that Montreal really carried the play throughout the series. But that was something different that they definitely had to adjust to.
Yeah, I mean, the Flyers had it was strange because the game that they got blown out and the other game they lost, they both had quote-unquote home ice advantage, where theoretically it means that Vigneault was able to have the last change. I think the most important thing that Vigneault did that kind of helped turn around this series from a strategic standpoint was when and I think it might have been for game 3, when he came out and he'd unstacked the top two lines, so that he put Giroux on the third line, he moved Raffl up to the first line, and I think that subtle change kind of changed the way that Montreal was thinking about matching up with the Flyers. And Raffl scored the first goal in that game 3, that absolute snipe. And I think that change, even though Giroux didn't really do anything on the third line, I just think that knowing that the Flyers had a little bit more dangerous players spread throughout the top 3 lines, that was strategically the most important thing to me that Vigneault did. I think he's going to have to change it up a little bit going into the Islander series, and maybe Abe Kubel will be ready. But I actually like Derek Grant on that fourth line a lot because I hate him on the third line. Yeah. The team's biggest issue clearly is the lack of a third line center who can drive play. And if they're going to go with the same third line with JVR, Giroux, and Lawton, I would put Lawton at center instead of Giroux, because Giroux he's not enough of a play driver to play center these days. But anyway, so that was the biggest thing strategically for Vigneault, was spreading out the lines a little bit, not because of the production it created, but because of the way to me, it made Montreal change how they were going at us.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that. And it was also some pundits mentioned that their gradual controlled zone entry approach. As the game goes on, less dumps, more controlled zone entries, hopefully allowing for more possession to protect these leads. And that played a role in the Flyers' success, at least in that category, along with Carter Hart. So, yeah, all those things combined, the Flyers are over the top in this series. And so we move on to what will be a real challenge for the Flyers, playing the New York Islanders. The Islanders played in the qualifying round, took out the Panthers. That's not an incredible feat, but they also took out what also seemed to be a little bit disinterested club in the Washington Capitals in 5 games. Got their coach fired, Chef. Todd Reardon is let go today. So, a lot happens when you get wiped out like that. It was the Islanders series to lose. It's just the Caps never really could get going. And give the Islanders credit. They're rolling a lot of lines. And, the one thing I would say, Montreal was a good primer for what the Islanders are going to bring. No, they don't have Shea Weber, and they don't have Carey Price. But they have more depth. They play more cohesive as a defensive unit and a 5-man unit, and they can kind of come at you in waves, and they have even more physicality than the Canadiens had. So it's going to be quite a test.
Well, I said it when the series started. I said the difference is totally, the coaching wins this one, and it was the coaching. You're right. Islanders have 4, solid lines. I mean, and they got a coach that has a really good system. Nobody nobody slacks off on this team. So having Montreal before this is a good practice run, so to speak, to get against this team. But this is a team you cannot sleep on. You can't lackadaisical as it made them pay. I mean, but the Caps never looked like they were back in it. They looked like they were just kind of along for the ride, and somebody told them they were still in the round robin round or something. I don't know. Yeah, you're not going to be able to do this. You're not going to be able to have the mistakes that you had against Montreal. You need to win the battles. You need to keep them to the outside, or they will burn you. And they got 3 really good lines that can burn you, and their checking line is going to wear you down all day.
Yeah, let's go through that, Dan. I'm going to just read these for people who aren't familiar with the Islanders, and you're going to hear these names coming up in at least 4 games. Matthew Barzal, he centers the first line between Anders Lee and Jordan Eberle, a guy who's hurt the Flyers, along with Barzal. The second line is centered by Brock Nelson, with Josh Bailey on the right side. He's playing some of his best hockey, and Anthony Beauvillier, another Flyer killer. It's getting a little scary. It's just on the history alone, that's what bothers me. And then another key matchup, and you also referred to this, that it might really be a critical matchup with J.G. Pageau, acquired and signed. So he's going to be an Islander going forward. It's not just a one-off with this guy. And he centers Leo Komarov. He's an in-your-face kind of guy. And Derek Brassard, who in the past has been a Flyers killer. And then the fourth line of Cizikas with Martin and Clutterbuck, who may or may not be healthy. If not, Bridgeport's Russ Johnson, or Johnston, I should say, will make up the solid 4 lines to come at you with a fair amount of physicality and speed. The first pairing for the Islanders, big physical, Adam Pelech and Ryan Pulock, both over 6 feet, over 200 pounds, not super mobile, but not. They do a good job. They again, this is a team that is a system team, and they play it to perfection at times. Second pairing is Devon Toews and Scott Mayfield, and then you have Nick Leddy with Andy Green on the third pair, and Johnny Boychuk I think he's healthy now, but Andy Green is kind of taking his spot. And then you have Semyon Varlamov in goal, and Thomas Greiss is not a bad backup. So I think Carter Hart is probably better than Varlamov, but Varlamov is a veteran, and it's a pretty solid team right now. And Dan, that third line is a big issue for me. Are you possibly open, if the Flyers look really bad with that matchup, to Morgan Frost?
At this point, I would love to see Morgan Frost playing, but to me at this point, it's just not going to happen. So unless there's injuries and they're forced to use him, I just don't think it's going to happen, because Morgan Frost has not played a single game in the bubble. He's been taking warm-ups with the guys, but even Mark Friedman got a game, during the bubble. He played in one of the round-robin games. I don't think they're going to go to Morgan Frost, because it's a lot asking a kid of his age who wasn't great in the regular season for the Flyers. I thought he deserved to stay in the lineup, even though he didn't. But considering the fact that he really only played, not that many games for the Flyers in the regular season, and considering how he has not been used so far in the bubble, I don't think we're going to see Morgan Frost. Look, the Islanders are very good team. They're very well coached. I picked them to beat the Caps in 5 or 6 games, just because I don't think the Caps are the same team that they've been, and I thought they were going to be completely out-coached. And you saw today that the Caps fired their head coach, Todd Reirden, who was made to look like an idiot by the Caps' former head coach. So it's hard for him to keep his job there. But the Caps have got a couple extremely high-end offensive players in Matthew Barzal and Brock Nelson. And Anthony Beauvillier has been terrific during the playoffs, at least from an offensive perspective. And this system they play is really strong. Now, they don't have a guy like a Shea Weber back there. And their team speed is not quite as good as the Canadiens. But the Flyers were 0-3 during the Islanders in the regular season. I think they had like one overtime loss, so they got 1 point out of the 3 games. 0-2-1. They don't really play all that well against the Islanders. At least this year they didn't. The Flyers need to take advantage of the fact that they got the number 1 seed, which means that Tampa and Boston are going to have a slaughter fest in this upcoming round 2. I mean, that's going to be the series of the playoffs, probably. Those 2 teams are arguably the best 2 teams in the league, and the Flyers instead get to play against the Islanders. Now, the Islanders are very good, but they're not the Lightning or the Bruins. So the Flyers are going to have to come out, and their offensive players are going to have to perform. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be another one of these series like the Canadiens one where every piece of ice is going to be fought for. But I think that this matchup is okay for the Flyers, and in some ways I think it's better than the matchup against the Canadiens.
That's interesting. We'll get to predictions a little later. I think that the Islanders are used to playing a certain way longer than the Flyers have been. And we saw that the way the Canadiens took the play to the Flyers. Physically, the speed and everything. And I agree, the Islanders are not as fast. But one thing they will do consistently and systematically is protect their goal. They will also block tons of shots, try to force the Flyers out to the perimeter. They're going to play very, very physical. And they have their group of stars are playing better and are more productive than the Flyers stars. And that's what concerns me. And that's why I go into this series with some question marks. But the Flyers were a better team in the regular season than the Islanders were, despite the matchup being what it was. Chef, what do you see as keys to the Flyers winning this series? And Dan, I'll get you to follow up on that because that's a big topic.
All right, like you said before, they're not as fast as Montreal. They need to exploit a little bit of that. They don't have a Shea Weber, as Dan so mentioned. They have very good guys in Pollock and Palek, but still, I mean, like you said, they're not very mobile. They can work around their defense. They need better puck management. When they're down in the corners, they can't be trying these cross-ice passes. They will pay for it every time. I don't understand why they keep doing it. The keys, and I think I'm stealing off of Bill Clement again. I'm sorry. The keys are going to be the north-south passing. They can't be trying this stuff at the blue line like have this past series. And I think they need to get better on their forechecking because Montreal had too many times, especially in Game 5 and 6, where they gained the zone too. I think they need, even getting out of their own zone, the Flyer they have to have the guy high up in their zone. They can't just let them skate down the ice. I think that's going to be key. And G and TK and Coots, they need to score. That's going to be the number one thing. They need to get scoring from their top guys.
Okay, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, it's the playoffs. It's not rocket science. They're going to have to get their top guys scoring. Giroux, Couturier, Konechny, they were first, third, and fourth on the team in goals in the regular season, and they've got 0 combined. So they're going to have to start scoring. Couturier is going to have to start finishing his chances. Same thing with Konechny. Giroux hasn't even had that many chances. He rang one off the post in the power play. But those guys are going to have to get going. The Flyers' power play is going to have to keep scoring. They're going to have to play physical hockey. And Anthony Beauvillier has been on an absolute tear. He's not very good defensively. I think when he's out there, you're going to have to, try and hem the Isles in their own zone. And when Barzal's out there, good luck. I mean, he's such a dynamic player, but they're going to have to try and find a way to maybe get under Barzal's skin is something I would try to do because he can lose his composure at times. So I might try and target him physically. A lot of these top players on the Islanders are not that imposing. And I think the Flyers need to impose their will because, again, it's not the Canadiens. They have Matt Martin, who is a badass, for lack of a better word, and Scott Mayfield. But aside from that, there's not a ton of big physicality there. So, those are some of the things that the Flyers are going to have to do. Keep the power play going, get those top players scoring, impose their will physically, and get under Matt Barzal's skin. That is, some of the things that I would say they need to do to be victorious.
Yeah, and I think there's a force multiplier. If you can get that power play going, then that will likely help the top players because they're the ones involved with the power play. So definitely 2-for-1 benefit there. I would add to that, they have to settle in defensively. Both Braun and Niskanen have been subpar. The best pairing the Flyers have had really has been the Myers and Sanheim pairing. And I'm wondering if Niskanen, like Dan referred to earlier, if he continues to struggle a little bit, if we might see Myers with Provorov in certain situations. I'm not saying the balance of the game, but Avy's going to coach to win. He can only care so much about people's feelings, and he's going to put combinations out there that are not necessarily going to be as sensitive to what's going to happen in the playoffs as he would during the regular season. This is the playoffs. Now it's no time for excuses or to worry about that you're concerned that somebody's confidence is going to take a hit. Now, there's just not enough time. It's win or go home. So I would also add that I'm open to the Flyers making some moves. And look, if that includes Shane Gostisbehere, that's fine. I do think the Islanders can be very physical as a team with the way they check. And even though there's not big guys there, they're more physical than the Canadiens were. And the other thing is, even though they allowed, I think, more chances versus the Caps, they had more high-quality chances, medium to high-quality chances than the Caps. So they're concentrating on getting to the net like any team would in the playoffs. And like Dan said, a lot of this is not rocket science. They're going to try to do the same thing in a slightly different way. So it should be interesting. It should be a great series. And we're going to have our predictions in just a little bit. We'll keep you a little bit in suspense. Let me give you the schedule here. So the series starts, as we're recording on Sunday, it starts tomorrow, Monday at 7 p.m. And none of these games are going to be broadcast locally, so it's going to be NBC Sportsnet National or NBC, the regular network, I guess, on the weekends for the most part. Okay, so Monday, then they follow up on Wednesday and Thursday. That's back-to-back. So there's a dynamic there that we experienced in the last series. And then Saturday, the 29th, a noon start. That'll go over like a lead balloon. And I would imagine that would be on NBC. We'll have to see that works out. And then, of course, we have Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday going into the following week, depending if you need 7 games or not. So, well, look, I think it's time for us to take a look around the league. But before we get to that, Dan, do you have any like Vegas odds or maybe some info from somebody like Dom Lecision or anything you want to share? Because I know that's kind of, or at least how are you doing with some of your wagers?
So, the only bets that I made at the beginning of this thing was I bet the Flyers to win the Cup at 10-1, which is not a good price, by the way. I did that honestly only because I was so mad at the fact that I can't go to any of these games, because the only reason I keep my season tickets, even though I live in D.C., is to be able to go to playoff games. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be thrilled if the Flyers win the Cup. But if they do, and I can't be at the games, I want to have some monetary gain. So I bet the Flyers to win the Cup. I bet them to get to the Cup finals, and I bet Vegas to win the Cup, because I just think going into the playoffs, I thought Vegas is the best team in the league, and so I bet them to win. I don't live close enough to a casino where I would necessarily go and play some bets, but if I was, I would have made a lot of money on the Islanders, because I loved them in that opening round series against the Caps. So I would have bet that. And we'll get to our predictions coming up here soon, but I will say, and I said this to my buddy before the game yesterday, is that I would have absolutely bet Dallas to beat Colorado, because I think a lot of people are just so gung-ho on Colorado right now. They're a good team, but they're still a little top-heavy, and I like the way the Dallas Stars play. So in this next round, I think that would be my only play. The Flyers are a slight favorite over the Islanders to win the series. The Lightning are a slight favorite to beat the Bruins. I wouldn't touch that series with a 10-foot pole. Yeah. And then out west, I mean, Avalanche were a big favorite, and Vegas is a big favorite to win their series.
Okay. All right. So there you go. If you still have time to bet on some of these, we already had one game last night. Dallas beat Colorado. But why don't we panel that one? I'll go first. I picked Colorado over Dallas originally in 5, but now they lost their goalie. And I don't know if I have a lot of faith in Francouz, or is it Francouz? I forget what it's pronounced, but I'm still going to go with Colorado, but I see this going 7 now. Chef?
I had the Avalanche in 6 for this, and that was before the game last night. And when I saw them go down, I went, ooh. So I'm still saying Colorado. 6 is maybe, but it's looking more like 7 now with the injury. But I'll stay to what I said previously. And Dan, I was lucky enough to get the Flyers 15-1 before any of the hockey started back, before any of the round robin or anything like that. I got them at 15-1, so I'm happy with that.
That's a good price, much better price than I got.
Much better.
So Dan, you've already picked Dallas. Well, how many games do you think that's going to go, especially in light of what
I would have, and again, I'm being completely honest. I said this to my buddy before the game started yesterday, that I would go Dallas in 6.
Okay. Well, that looks stronger than it did even before the game. That's for sure. Dan, let me stick with you. And we got to address the subplot in the Vegas Golden Knights. I'm picking them to beat Vancouver in 6, but that's assuming that scimitar in the back of Marc-Andre Fleury can be removed, hopefully by Alan Walsh, who I will openly say is a schmuck for posting a picture of the said scimitar in the back of Marc-Andre Fleury, and apparently Robin Lehner is going to get the start versus Vancouver. What's your analysis there?
I mean, yeah, that was just a ridiculous post from Alan Walsh, who's an NHL agent who posts a lot on Twitter, off-color stuff, and he posted a sword basically going through Andre Fleury's back, Marc-Andre Fleury's back, and it said DeBoer on it. So basically claiming that the coach is putting his sword through Marc-Andre Fleury's back and going with Robin Lehner. It is surprising to me that they've leaned on Lehner so far in the playoffs, but Marc-Andre Fleury is like a superhuman being. I mean, he's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. And I can't imagine that he liked his agent posting that. It's adding a little drama. I think Vegas is just too strong for the Canucks. I was a little surprised that the Canucks beat the Blues, but Jordan Binnington was horrible, so that didn't help out the Blues. I think Vegas will handle, I think that Ryan Reeves could pick up Elias Pettersson in one hand and crush him like a bug. But I think Vegas will get through that series in 5.
Wow. Yeah. I'm kind of thinking it's going to take 6. I really do respect the top-end talent that Vancouver has, and it's better than the top-end talent in Vegas. It's just Vegas is like, they're a machine, and they come at you in waves, and Shea Theodore is really, really a good defenseman. So, I mean, I like Vancouver's future, but this year I got the Vegas Golden Knights in 6. Chef?
Yeah, you said it. That was a really good analogy. It's like waves crashing on the beach. They just keep coming and coming. I have Vegas in 6 as well. I like Vancouver too. They're really fun to watch, but I just think that Vegas is just too well put together.
Yeah, definitely. Now, okay, so we got. I'll stick with you, Chef. Just mix it up a little bit. Tampa Bay Lightning playing the Boston Bruins without Tuukka Rask. Now, Bruins were my choice before the season and even again before the playoffs to win the Cup. I'm not going to do that this time, but I'll let you go first and give us your prediction about what's going to happen with Tampa and the Boston Bruins.
Boy, this one's going to be like a dogfight, isn't it? It's going to be like it's going to be if this game could if this series could go to 9 games with the 3 or 4 overtime games that these two teams are going to have. I think there's going to be a lot of overtime games in this, and it's just going to be nasty. And that's great. That's great if you're a Flyers fan and you believe that the Flyers are going to outlast the Islanders. So I think it's just going to be very hard fought. It's going to be back and forth. One team, you'll have your classic stories of every Stanley Cup run. I mean, this will be the game that everybody you always talk about that one series in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and I think this is it. This is going to be the one, and I think Tampa ekes out 7 games, though.
Okay. And I think that if Tuukka Rask was the goaltender, I would be picking Boston in 7. But this is a real shift, a seismic shift. And I think the longer it goes, the more it is in Boston's favor with their veteran savvy. But I'm still picking the Tampa Bay Lightning to defeat the Boston Bruins in 7 games. You, Dan, what do you say?
Man, I'm with Chef from the perspective that we want this series to be an absolute war, and obviously, we need the Flyers to get past the Islanders, which is no small feat. But the Bruins still have something about their team. I mean, you watch them in the third period against the Hurricanes, that game that they just turned everything around, McAvoy with that big hit. I just think that the Bruins have something. They've got that special it. I think they've got it, and I'm not sure necessarily Tampa does. I will not be surprised if this goes either way, but I'm going to pick the Bruins in 7.
Okay. You're hanging with my prediction, except you have more faith with that Rask. I just don't know if Halak could get them over the top.
I think Halak's been one of the most underrated goalies in the league for a long time, and I think the Bruins have been very, very lucky to have him as their backup. So doesn't concern me quite as much, but I get it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Definitely Halak over like Kudobin in Dallas. So to me, Dallas, they get back to that just a little bit. I think at some point they're going to need Ben Bishop. I'm not sure what the status of his health is, but so I have like about 4 drums here, but I'm not going to. I'll spare us the drum roll for the Flyers. But okay, so I'll let you guys go first. Chef, Flyers Islanders. What's going to happen and why?
Well, I think the Flyers have a wake-up call in this round. I think the jitters are out of the way. I think Hart really settles in. I think he's a difference maker. I think it's going to be a lot of 1-goal games, a lot of checking, a lot of hitting from the Flyers side, because that's what you got to do. You got to make the Islanders out of position because they're such a good team. Like they might not be as fast as Montreal, like we said, but they play a good system, and they're not fast, but they're rarely out of position. They play their zone good, so I think it's going to be tough, but I do believe the Flyers win in 7.
Okay, Flyers in 7. Dan, let's get your prediction.
Yeah, I think that the Flyers. You see this a lot of times in any sport where you've got a team that you think is kind of superior, and they go in and they struggle early on in the playoffs, and then they advance, and then they start playing a lot better. And I just have to believe that that's what we're going to see from the Flyers. And look, it really could go either way. I mean, they're still a pretty young team who's not that playoff tested, and so maybe the Islanders come in and steamroll them like they did the Capitals. But I just have to think that the Flyers are going to get it going a little bit more. And I think that what's going to carry them to the victory is they just have a little bit more star power. And I think those guys are going to start scoring. They've got the goalie. They've got a good, young, mobile defense. And I just think in the end, they have good coaching, and I think their talent's going to win out. And I think the Flyers are going to really play a lot better in this series than they did against Montreal, and I'm going to take them in 6.
Okay, Flyers in 6. Okay. I think the Flyers have an edge on the talent level on defense and in goal. But I also think that some of that talent is untested at this level in a playoff spot. And while I don't think Carter Hart is going to shrink in a moment by any stretch, I think actually Varlamov is more likely to shrink and has been more erratic throughout his career. But I think the team in front of him plays the way they have to play, which is a lot like the Flyers and the Canadiens, what we just saw, better and is more used to playing that way than the Flyers are. And their stars are heading into this series playing much better than the Flyers stars. I don't like the third line matchup that the Flyers are going to have to deal with Pajot in that line with Komarov, and I think it's Brassard. And that's not a great level of talent, but it clearly is better. It's one matchup the Flyers are probably going to lose throughout the entire series. And Couturier is going to have to try to shadow Barzal and make Barzal play in his own zone as often as possible. So that really has to be the focus. But I think the Islanders have more depth right now and are playing at a higher level and, like I said earlier, are doing the things they need to do and are used to doing it better than the Flyers. So unless Carter Hart can really be Superman, I think the Islanders are going to generate more dangerous chances throughout the entirety of the series, and they're going to beat the Flyers in 6 games. It's not what I want.
Boo!
Way to pee in the Cheerios. Thanks, buddy.
Well, I've been watching this team for 50 years, and the last time the Flyers played the Islanders, I think, was 1987. And they beat them. They beat them before in 85, and before that, I think it was the finals where the Islanders actually won their first cup. And then before that, I think it was 75, where the Islanders were down 3-0, coming off of rallying 3-0 to win a series versus Pittsburgh, and then almost did the same thing versus the Flyers that year in 75. So fast forward to today, I just think the Islanders are a little bit more playoff ready than the Flyers. If Hart substantially outplays Varlamov and Varlamov kind of falls apart a little bit, then I could see an opening for the Flyers. But right now, based on the way they're playing and how these teams wish to play, I think, I think the Islanders are going to take it. But hey, I hope I'm wrong.
By the way, I love doing that, making that pick. That's what you believe, because quite honestly, if fans are listening to all these Flyers podcasts, I'm guessing every single host is picking the Flyers to advance. And you have a feeling, you think that the Islanders are going to, continue to roll and take this series. And I greatly respect the fact that you're making that pick. Plus, it's going to make it more interesting as we go along and see what happens. So I love it.
I don't do it for effect. I keep it real. And then, you know that. And Chef, I don't have to tell you, that's for sure. Yeah, that's how I feel.
No. I totally get it. But my one question is this, though, because I think they have a chance. And if the Flyers are going to win, do you think the top line with Coots, Raffle will have an effect to shut down Barzal and Lee and Eberle? Do you think that's even possible? Do you think that if they can contain them in their own zone, that the maybe the other Flyers, the second line, can maybe light it up this,
Well, they're going to have to neutralize that line. Now, neutralize could be match them goal-wise, but they can't have guys like Barzal and Beauvillier on the other line, and some of these guys have killed the Flyers for the last few years, having the kind of production they're currently having. And Josh Bailey's playing some of his best hockey. I just don't get the sense that the Flyers are there yet. I mean, Kevin Hayes didn't wake up till later in the series. Couturier played fairly well, but didn't score. Giroux hasn't been impressive, I'll put it that way. Jake is really the only... Jake and later in the series, Hayes are the only one one out of their big guns that are doing anything. Konechny is trying. He's shooting wide. It's in his head. He's got to wake up. Meanwhile, the Islanders are cruising, and they have a good record against the Flyers. So that's why I'm kind of going with that. They say that you can't go by the regular season, but the way these teams have to play under Trotz and under AV, respectively, I think the Islanders have an edge for that reason with all those factors considered. So that's where we're at. There's 8 teams, 4 series. We've given our predictions, and we're going to come back to talk to you again, I guess Friday or Sunday. We're not sure. We're going to time it when it's a good time to get in and another O&B Puckcast. And with that, any final thoughts? And Dan, let's get your ID information where people can contact you, and any final things that you may want to say.
So fans can follow me on Twitter at dsilver88 and throw me a follow and argue with me or agree with me or whatever. But it's NHL playoffs. It's just great. I mean, we've got the Bruins and the Lightning tonight. That series is going to be incredible. Oh, yeah. I tweeted this out the morning of Game 6. Flyers fans, we should try and enjoy this because this team's going to be good for a while, and it is very stressful. Look, it's incredibly stressful. But just try and find a way to enjoy the ride and not, especially on Twitter, you just see people getting so fired up about everything, and I get it. I get fired up sometimes too. But let's keep in mind that this Flyers team is made it to the final 8, and the future is going to be really bright for this team. So, let's hope they keep winning. But if they lose a game here or there, try and keep it in perspective.
Absolutely. We saw that after Game 5. And, a poster that we both like very much was kind of freaking out. Like, no, this is the ups and downs of a playoff series. That's what it is. And, I was going back and forth after the series with a young writer from FlyersNittyGritty.com. Real nice guy. And I just think he didn't see certain things. But that's what happens. You get up. The Flyers won. I was happy, but I was a little bit wary of, what they have to do going forward, which obviously I expressed tonight. Chef, what say you?
Yeah, I think it's, have yourself fun. Have fun with it. Enjoy it. It is the first time in a very long time that we've got to actually enjoy this team in the playoffs. And I just say that. Grab your popcorn, your favorite beverage. Dan's a bourbon guy, right? I'm a Scotch guy. It's kind of same family. So just enjoy it. Take point is like not just the Flyers games. There's going to be a lot of good series going out there. The Canucks and Knights is going to be a really good series. You already mentioned Bruins Lightning, and the Stars Avalanche. I mean, it's already taken a crazy turn. So tune into the other games too. Don't limit yourself. Just enjoy playoff hockey while it's here. Because in Philadelphia, anyway, the only thing going on right now. We won't even mention the other. You can mention another disaster.
So people can follow you on Twitter at Chef to the Left B.
Yes, sir.
Yes. And I'm Isaiah, and you can follow me on Twitter at Isaiah _520 ISAIAH_. Don't forget that 520 Isaiah _520. And of course, the O&B Puckcast. You can follow us at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck. We're on Facebook. We have a YouTube channel. Please rate and subscribe your favorite platform. It moves us up the charts, so when people look for Philadelphia Flyer podcasts, we're more readily available for you to follow. We get new listeners all the time. We're hitting highs. I should say, again, we're doing real well with our listens, and we appreciate it. Sorry for what happened last week, but it turned out just fine. So the O&B Puckcast will be back sometime next week after, say, Game 3 or Game 4. One of those, just follow us at O&B Puck, and we'll let you know when the next Puckcast is coming to you. With that, everybody, let's go Flyers, and take care.